Hello, and thank you for showing an interest in my research presentation. Exploring therapeutic experiences. Are emotional breakthroughs unique to psychedelic experiences? This 15-minute presentation will provide an overview of my master's research dissertation topic, which explored the therapeutic experience of individuals with a history of psychedelic substance use and individuals without a history of psychedelic substance use, to compare their experience of counselling and psychotherapy. So just to begin with a little bit about me, my name is Victoria Wilkes and I'm currently studying in my final year at Bangor University, studying an MSc in the theories of counselling. So my particular research interests are on theories of counselling and the internal processes which make counselling and psychotherapy work. Having had therapy myself, I reflected on what was going on for me in therapy. I was seeing the benefits of therapy, but I was questioning why this was working. I felt like I'd gained an understanding into myself and into my life and my relationships, and there were sessions where I felt like I'd made real progress. So because of this, I began to question what was going on there. Was I experiencing an emotional breakthrough? And I wanted to take a moment to invite you to think about whether there's been a time in therapy yourselves or a time in your life where you feel like you've experienced an emotional breakthrough. And if so, what did that feel like? There is little empirical evidence to explain the internal processes which makes counselling and psychotherapy work. However, there's emerging research from the field of psychedelic-assisted therapy, also known as PAP, which suggests that emotional breakthrough and psychological insights are distinct components of the psychedelic experience, alongside being a key mediator for subsequent long-term change. So what is an emotional breakthrough and what is psychological insight? So Roseman's 2019 study defined emotional breakthrough as the overcoming of a challenging emotion and its subsequent release, whereas Davis's 2021 research defines psychological insight as the degree of clarity of one's thoughts, feelings and behaviours, as well as an awareness of one's own internal state. And it was the findings of this research which was the driving force for this study. So we know that psychedelic drugs have been used by humans for hundreds of years for recreational, spiritual and healing purposes. And the research into PAP sought to understand the occurrence of this mystical type experience, which determined the long-term effects of psychedelics. So we know that the research is suggesting that emotional breakthroughs and psychological insights may be predictors of these changes. Roseman's research sought to validate the EBI, the Emotional Breakthrough Inventory, whereas Davis's research sought to validate the PIQ, the Psychological Insight Questionnaire. These measures have the potential to extend our understanding of the acute and enduring effects of psychedelics and their effects on well-being. These findings and the validation of the EBI and PIQ measure prompted our research question. So we wanted to investigate whether emotional breakthroughs and psychological insights were unique to those with an experience of psychedelic substances, or whether emotional breakthroughs and psychological insights could be achieved in talking therapy alone. This research question prompted the following research hypotheses. So hypothesis 1. We thought that the reporting of emotional breakthroughs and psychological insights as measured by the EBI and PIQ would be positively correlated with well-being scores as measured by the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale. Our second hypothesis was that the reporting of emotional breakthroughs and psychological insights would be positively correlated with the number of completed therapeutic sessions. And thirdly, we thought that participants who had reported the historical use of psychedelic substances would report higher levels of emotional breakthrough and psychological insight than individuals who had not reported having used a psychedelic substance. So how did we seek to study our research question? So because previous research in this field had only tested participants with a history of psychedelic use, or participants who were currently under the influence of a psychedelic substance, we aimed to compare the responses of participants who had stated they had a history of psychedelic use with participants who stated they had never used a psychedelic substance. Therefore, we chose to use the measures validated by Roseman and Davis, so the EBI and the PIQ, alongside the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, to build on the findings of this previous research. All the measures we use in this study were verified and deemed suitable for use in this research by the Bangor University Research and Ethics Board. So firstly, participants were asked to provide demographic information such as their age, gender, ethnicity and employment status in order to build a picture of our participants. Participants were also asked to provide information relating to the amount of therapy they'd had, the amount and experience of psychedelic substances, if any, and participants who reported they had used psychedelic substances in the past were invited to write in their own words about their experience of psychedelic substances. Participants were recruited online from an adult population through an opportunity sample, and our online questionnaire was sent out via social media to Instagram, Facebook, Reddit and Twitter, alongside being posted on the BACP Research Notice Board. It was sent out in emails to counselling associations, and it was distributed via the SONA Student Participant Panel to recruit participants from the Bangor University student population. And out of the opportunity sample of 171 participants, the sample size I examined was 75 participants. So participants were excluded if they reported their age as being below 18 years of age. They were excluded if they had not completed at least 6 sessions of counselling or psychotherapy, or if more than 6 months had passed since their last engagement with counselling or psychotherapy, and no further exclusion criteria were applied. So the majority of respondents reported that they had completed 6 to 15 sessions of counselling or psychotherapy, and those participants equated to 48% of our sample. We had a varied sample. We had participants who had completed 6 to 15 sessions, 16 to 30 sessions, 31 to 50 sessions of counselling or psychotherapy, all the way up to participants who reported having exceeded 100 sessions of counselling or psychotherapy. And we found there was a significant positive correlation between the EBI, PIQ and Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale measures. So to expand on that in terms of emotional breakthrough, participants were asked to complete the EBI measure by drawing on their own experience of counselling or psychotherapy. And although the EBI measure includes the statement, "I had an emotional breakthrough," as you can see there in figure 1, the participants' EBI scores were calculated by the total means of this 6-item questionnaire. And across the entire sample, responses to the statement, "I felt able to explore challenging emotions or memories," was the highest mean score across the 6-item inventory. So this provides an insight into the internal processes that our participants reported in counselling and psychotherapy in terms of emotional breakthroughs. So to take a closer look at the results pertaining to psychological insight, participants were invited to rate the extent to which they agreed with the statement that they had taken psychedelics to gain a deeper psychological insight into themselves. The majority of respondents reported that they agreed very much that they had taken psychedelics for therapeutic intentions, and these participants equated to 45.71% of the population. As seen in figure 2, which plots the means plot of the PIQ scores and amount of therapy, the mean PIQ scores fall from 6 to 15 sessions to 31 to 50, where there's a steep incline in the PIQ scores when we get to 51 to 100 sessions of therapy. And to investigate the third hypothesis of whether participants who reported psychedelic substance use would report higher levels of emotional breakthrough and psychological insight than participants who had never used psychedelics, a bivariate correlation was conducted. And results from this found that mean EBI and PIQ scores were higher in the groups who reported never having taken psychedelic substances as compared to the groups who had a history of psychedelic substances. If we take a closer look at figures 3 and 4, we can see that there's an upward trend in the relationships between the respondents' mean EBI scores and the reported number of historic substances until we get to 100 plus uses of a psychedelic substance. And figure 4 shows that there's a steady increase in the PIQ scores as the number of historic psychedelic uses increases. However, this drops off at 21 to 50 uses before rising again at 51 to 100 uses. As for the respondents' experiences of psychedelic substances, participants were invited to comment in their own words on the extent that their previous experience of psychedelic substances had been therapeutic in nature. The majority of respondents noted a feeling of relaxation or release, and alongside this they experienced a heightened insight into themselves or a greater sense of self-esteem. However, the responses to this free text option were not wholly representative of a therapeutic experience. Some participants noted that the after effects of psychedelic use were uncomfortable and not therapeutic in nature, and they noted that they'd experienced a bad trip whilst they were not mentally in a good place. To investigate whether emotional breakthroughs were reported by participants who had never taken psychedelic substances, but who had engaged with regular counselling or psychotherapy, the relationships between participants' EBI scores and amount of therapy were examined. So in order to do this, respondents were separated into two groups, those without a history of psychedelic substances and those with a history of psychedelic substances. If we take a look at the mean scores for both of these groups, we can see that the mean score for participants who had never taken psychedelic substances was 58.65. However, the mean EBI score for participants who have reported a history of psychedelic substances, mean score is 60.46. So we can see that the scores for the group who have a history of psychedelics is higher than those without. However, if we take a look at figure 5, we can see an upwards curve in the relationship between respondents who had never taken psychedelic substances, but with the amount of therapy increases, their EBI score also increases. Whereas in figure 6, we can see that mean EBI scores in the group who have taken psychedelics increases from 6 to 15 sessions to 16 to 30 sessions before this drops at 31 to 50, and there's a steep incline then to 51 to 100 sessions. So what do the findings of this research study show? Well, the study found a significant relationship between EBI scores and PIQ scores, which have not been previously investigated in any prior research and was not originally hypothesised. Findings also suggest that both emotional breakthroughs and psychological insights are not unique to psychedelic-assisted therapy as previously understood, as respondents who have never taken psychedelic substances but who have engaged in counselling and psychotherapy have reported experiencing emotional breakthroughs and psychological insight as defined by Roseman and Davis's measures. Moreover, emotional breakthroughs have been previously understood as a distinct component to the psychedelic experience and a predictor of long-term psychological change. And as such, we hypothesise that there would be a positive correlation between mean EBI scores and amount of psychedelic use. However, in our research we've shown an upwards curve in the group which have never taken psychedelics, which show a positive relationship between the EBI and amount of therapy. And in addition, respondents who reported a negative historic experience of psychedelic substances also reported that they had not taken psychedelics with any therapeutic intent for therapeutic benefits. It's important to note that unlike Roseman's 2019 study and Davis's 2021 study, this research did not conduct dose-dependent trials with participants who took psychedelic substances for therapeutic effect in the presence of a professionally trained therapist. In previous research into psychedelic-assisted therapy, participants were under the influence of psychedelics as research was carried out to investigate dose-dependent effects. However, in this study, we were unaware of the psychedelic substance used, the dosage of that substance, and when and where this psychedelic substance was taken. And this is due to confidentiality and legal implications. Participants were requested in the online questionnaire not to divulge any information pertaining to their psychedelic experience other than their psychological reflections about psychological and therapeutic effects. Therefore, when we were analysing the data, researchers were not aware of when the respondents had experienced the psychedelic substance. Research would also benefit from a more diverse participant pool. So 65% of the participants we investigated were from the student population. And this is not necessarily a negative in itself. However, research would benefit from researching a more representative sample. So what are the theoretical implications of these research findings? Well, the mystical-like experiences following psychedelic use can be explained as a sense of relief following an emotional breakthrough, and an elevated sense of psychological insight which occurs as amount of therapy increases. The finding of this research have the potential to guide future therapeutic interventions and techniques in order to improve the well-being of those attending counselling and psychotherapy. The implications of the finding that PIQ and EBI scores are positively correlated at a significant level suggest that incorporating these measures into counselling and psychotherapy may allow clients to reflect on their psychological introspections and internal processes to help them to achieve a greater sense of understanding of their own relationships and a sense of clarity about their internal world. And this is the first study that introduced both the EBI and PIQ measure to its participants, and future research may benefit from combining the central tenets of these measures to investigate the internal processes of participants undergoing counselling and psychotherapy to contribute to the empirical research base, with research suggesting what it is that makes counselling and psychotherapy work. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to my presentation, Exploring Therapeutic Experiences, Are Emotional Breakthroughs Unique to Psychedelic Experiences? Please feel free to ask me any questions in the comments box below. I'll be answering these questions live on the conference day on the 19th of May. Alternatively, you're welcome to contact me via email, which is on screen, where I'll be happy to share a copy of my research presentation handout and also to share some more information about the research study. Thank you very much.